Thanks for joining me today. For those of you who are familiar with my channel, you may have seen my twin monitor sim, and I've had a lot of information about that on my channel, but I've never really explained how it's set up. So I'd like to do that in this video, look at how it's set up and give you a basic idea of how it operates. Also, I'd like to provide some pointers for those who might consider trying to set a sim like that up for themselves, with some pros, cons, and where this is going in the way of simulator technology. Also, I'm going to compare the performance of the OpenGL versus the Vulkan version of X-Plane using the beta number 3 of the 11.50. And then we'll fly a short flight and compare some of the video and frame rates, and give you an idea if the performance is really what it's cracked up to be, and to see if this is the way to go in the future for multi-monitor simulators. So let's get started. My simulator is made up of 3 monitors mounted on rolling stands, and a seat, panel, and controls mounted on another rolling platform. The panel is connected to a separate computer and has 2 LCD screens and only basic flight controls, including the gear flaps, switch panel, starter, and parking brake. A knobster, described more fully in my other videos, is used for other input functions on the touch screens. Let's take a look at how it's set up. The main parts of the system consist of 3 49-inch LCD TVs, which are a little bit old and have some limitations, which I'll explore later. The panel contains 2 15.6-inch touchscreen LCD monitors that are often used for additional monitors attached to laptop computers. The PC shown to the left, which I'll call the master computer, is connected to the LCD screens and runs one copy of X-Plane 11. This allows the flight model to be operated on the number 1 computer, as well as providing pop-out windows from X-Plane, and to run Air Manager with a panel that lets the pop-up windows show through to the end user. Here you can see what this 15.6-inch panel monitors look like when only X-Plane is running. You can see the X-Plane window on the left, which will be obscured later by the panel. You also have the 2 pop-out windows positioned and sized to fit behind the Air Manager panel. Now let's open the Air Manager panel and see how the whole combination looks. As you can see, the Air Manager windows have transparent openings that perfectly frame the pop-out windows from X-Plane. The Air Manager panel can be set to always remain on top so that the X-Plane windows cannot come on top of that, making a fairly realistic operation, especially with touch control. An inadvertent touch can't bring the X-Plane windows to the front, so they remain transparent to the user. The popped out X-Plane windows can only be operated from the master copy of X-Plane running in a network situation. And that's the situation here, where the master or panel computer is only providing the flight model and the pop-out windows, allowing the heavy lifting to be done by the external visual computer driving the 3 large monitors. The external visual monitor is connected to the 3 LCD screens and runs a second copy of X-Plane 11 to provide scenery only, allowing a single computer to devote all of its processing power into generating these 3 views greatly increases the frame rate available. But still, in the OpenGL realm, this has been a very demanding task for even the most powerful computers available for home use. The purpose of this video is to see if affordable computers can now provide with Vulkan the computing power necessary to drive a 3-monitor visual sim, and at an acceptable frame rate and visual quality. The 2 computers running X-Plane copies communicate through the local area network, either via Ethernet or Wi-Fi. The external visual computer gets flight model information from the master copy. but the graphics settings for the two computers do not need to match. In this case, the master copy, providing 2D pop-out windows, can operate at a much lower graphics setting with less computing power than the external visual, which is seen and wants to be providing all the eye candy for the simulator. Before we start, I'd like to just show you the settings in the computer capabilities of the two computers that are involved in the test. The master computer, which is actually the least powerful, has a older i7 4770 processor, no water cooling, 24 gigs of RAM, and 64-bit operating system, in a GeForce GTX 1070. The external visual computer has an i7 8700K CPU with no water cooling, 16 gigs of RAM, and 64-bit operating system. Has a GTX 1070 Ti, which is not that powerful by today's standards. There's a lot of inexpensive cards that can match that performance. Quick look at the network settings for the master and external visual computers before we look at the graphics settings and then get on with our flight. Now let's look at the graphics settings for the master machine. You can see that the machine's role is set in the upper right as master, and on the bottom we have machines whose view is independent from ours, and we have the machine name, the computer, the external visual, which I've named Flight Sim Visual. You can go to the settings, the about settings on your settings in Windows, and it says rename this computer, and you can rename it something that's useful, and that name would show up, and you can set that there. The machines whose views are locked hours would mean that the view would change every time someone changed the master view. For example, if it was in a cockpit, it would change the external view. We want this view to be independent. If we now look at the settings for the networking for the external visual, you can see in the upper right it's set the machine's role as external visual, and you can see that it shows what computer that it's selected to. In this case, the master, Flight Sim Master is what I've named it. And if we now look at the graphics settings for the master machine, it's almost laughable. You see I have everything at the very bottom because the window that is being displayed is not seen, and the pop-out windows are 2D windows, and it really makes no difference what graphics settings are in. So this is a big saver of performance for us. And although I have a fairly powerful computer running as the number 2 machine, I think you could get by with a lot less as long as you can maintain a decent frame rate for the flight model. Certainly you want it to be much better than what you can get for the visuals, so they can be updated frequently. Finally, here are the graphics settings that I have set for the test that we're going to do. Be advised, this is 11.50 beta 3. So there's another beta out, but I had already started this video, so I wasn't going to refilm it. The moderately high settings, a lot of objects, reflection in there a little bit, some anti-aliasing way above what I used to use before, parked aircraft, they don't have the shadows on. And we'll see how this comes out. This is a pretty moderately high settings, I would consider. Now, before I enter into the footage of this test, I want to explain a little bit what I've done. I've positioned a camera and flew the mission and recording the images off the external visual during playback. Because that's running on a separate computer, the frame rate should be the same no matter what's driving it from the flight model. So I'm going to do that, and then I filmed it the second time holding my iPhone, which isn't the most optimum camera, but it's the best I have. So you'll see that. And what I've done is superimposed the frame rate in the words Vulkan and OGL, so you can compare the footage in the same approximate places in the flight. Now, while the frame rates are definitely objective, the Video is a bit subjective. It depends on how you see it. The reflections, there's some reflections off my monitors, which is one of the things I don't like about my monitors. They have way too much reflection. The viewing angles are a little bit poor, so as it get towards the corners you'll see some darkness in the monitors, and that's not noticeable visually, but due to the polarization of the camera lens and the way the screens are set up, that shows up in the video. Another thing you'll notice is that the monitors don't handle motion real well. They're not extremely new. I'd love to upgrade them into a more responsive monitor, but some of that shows up, and it's definitely not X-Plane that's doing that. So overlook some of the blurriness due to poor camera technique, but the frame rates, as I said, are going to be a reliable measure of the performance of what you're seeing. Now when you see this OpenGL, as you can see in the upper right, and there'll be a frame rate, and that will give you the whenever footage that's taken in the OpenGL run, it'll show there, and it'll be interchanged back and forth between OpenGL and Vulkan. When you see this, you'll know that the footage you're seeing is from the Vulkan run, and again you can compare the frame rates. So what you'll notice, I've backed up just a second or so each time I switch there to give you just a little bit of a warning that they're changing, but I think you'll also notice those changes. So let's take a look at this video, and then in the end I'm going to draw a few conclusions from what we see and talk about a few hints and pointers for those who might want to try to set up a multi-monitor sim as far as selecting an LCD screen and as I've already pointed out, the hardware requirements. So I'm going to come along on the flight here and give you some comments. This panel was built using those touchscreen monitors, those little 15.6 inch. I got a video about that. It's quite interesting. But we'll start up. I like the touchscreens because you can change airplanes quite easily. Now here you can see OpenGL. The problem with this monitor is it has some judder. There's Vulkan. It looks a little sharper. If the camera's not moving, you get a pretty good picture. But see, once I start moving the camera, panning the camera, the combination of the judder makes it look jerky, and it's not as bad as it looks. The faster I move. Once I stop the camera, picture looks quite, look at those power lines. It's quite clear. The windows on the building. But as soon as I move the camera, the slightest bit, it starts to look irregular. And there's OpenGL, and you can see some of the lights and so on just jerking a little, because with a 20 frame rate. By the way, this is my Corona curl here. Sorry, but no haircut for me tonight. I'm going to give my wife a chance, but I apologize for that. Okay, so here we go again. With the camera still, even the OpenGL, now the settings are the same, so they look essentially the same, although I still think Vulkan looks a little crisper. But once I start moving that camera, it gets blurry, and there's nothing I can do about that. And once I stop the camera, it comes into focus. So there, stop. There you go, just for a second. You can see it's pretty stunning how clear it is. And I detected absolutely no jerking with Vulkan, but with OpenGL, a little jerky. I could see, well, that 20 frame rate here, and look, compared to 45, there's just no way it can compare. So here we are, OpenGL taking the runway straight ahead. It looks good. There's no doubt. I just can't maintain those graphic settings for any length of time with the OpenGL. You can sense now there's a little shakiness there. Every time I move the camera, it gets shaky again. So if I just hold it still for just a second, if I would hold it still, you get an idea how crisp it looks. But I'm still moving the camera. There, it's steady, a little bit steady. You can see quite a nice view, and no real problems. There's Vulkan again. It's a little judder, but you're just seeing the judder, and that's what judder is, when the screen jumps in little short segments across the screen. Or whichever way the screen's turning. Instead of panning, it kind of jumps, and it's hard to distinguish that from here again. Focus is bad because it turned. Once I roll out, The image looks great. It's just not as smooth with OpenGL, and obviously almost actually over 2 times the frame rate at this point of the flight. So, and Miami's not an extremely high, but it's a pretty high density field. There's Vulkan, beautiful view down the runway now, back to OpenGL, and it doesn't look bad. Lots of that blurriness is only on the Vulkan version, and I don't know what that is. I think it's for the propeller. Obviously I have scenery only, so I don't have a propeller. I wish there was a way to put the propeller back in. I'm going to have to look into that. If anybody knows, put it in the comments how I can put the propeller back into the scene and eliminate everything else, because I like flying with this open view. There, let me hold the camera still for a second. If I'll just slow down. There we go. Now you can see it's nice and crisp. But as soon as I move the camera the slightest bit, that iPhone, there we go. That's pretty steady. You get a nice view. The building's off in the distance. And we're getting 39 frames here, and the OpenGL is still running in the 20 range. So it's still double. The frame rate here is 20. And look, when the camera moves, it's even blurrier, which gives me the impression there is just a little bit of, and you can kind of see how those airplanes are kind of jumping a little bit. And that's, again, partially the judder from these monitors. If you're going to buy a monitor, I strongly encourage you to do some research. At the end, I'm going to tell you where you can find that kind of information. But if you look at along these monitors are back at a 60-degree angles, which gives me 180 degrees field of view. I got a video on how to set that up. If you look at it on how to set up multi-monitors, it talks about the geometry. But we get 180 degrees field of view, which means we can look right out the wing line. But that means we're looking at the corners of those at almost 60 degrees angle. And some monitors lose a little bit of brightness when they're angled. So that's an issue sometimes. There's a nice look out into the distance there. I'll hold the camera still, you get an idea. If I ever stop panning there, you get a nice view of how crisp it is. You can see nice crisp view, and then I have to move the camera again. OpenGL looks good, but not quite as smooth. And you can see the trees kind of slowly jumping along there. It's a little stutter. We're back to Vulkan, turning final. I got to tell you that it's a much more smooth operation with this higher frame rate. Like the OpenGL. So I would say that the frame rates are at least almost twice as fast. Let's see if I panic on that. If I just hold the camera still, but I didn't realize when I was filming this that it was such a problem. Okay. I kind of got the John Madden problem here. I do a little bit too much I'm too much color with my play-by-play. As we turn here, let's see. Yeah, it's just not as smooth, not quite as smooth, but it's hard to say. It's hard to tell. And if I think if I do this again, I'm going to mount the cameras and look and record each monitor without any panning, and I think I'd get a much better representation. I might look into that when we get a final beta here. If I want to test this again, I'll keep this flight profile in my simulator so that I can. So anyway, that's basically the flight. You can see what was involved, and I'll have a few conclusions in just a moment. So in summary, why should anyone bother to use a two-computer system? Well, obviously the first reason is performance. I really think you need about a 30 frame per second frame rate to have reasonable flight model and response with your sim, and That just wasn't possible until now without really dumbing down the graphics settings. By displaying the scenery only on the second computer, you can greatly reduce its workload and get higher frame rates and higher graphics settings. Second, if you want to operate more than 4 windows, most modern graphic cards are limited to 4 ports. So the second computer gives you options for more. Not that you couldn't add more graphics card. And I do think that I may try running this monitor setup with one plane using the internal graphics or another graphics card. We'll see about that. But there is a penalty for every additional window that you run in X-Plane. And finally, I just love my pop-out windows from X-Plane. I love to use them in Air Manager panels. I think they look cool. They work great. Don't have to program yourself, but the downside is that they have to be on the same computer as X-Plane. So if you want to unload the graphics on the visuals, you have to have the master running on a different machine, or you're going to lose the performance. So why wouldn't you want to do this? Well, there's several good reasons. First of all, you have to pay for 2 computers, and that's costly, and not to mention the maintenance. You have to continue to maintain that thing, and sometimes you have to add add-ons to both sims and change things. It can be complicated in a lengthy process. And finally, if you don't need the pop-outs and you don't want to use them and you're not using Air Manager, that may not be a factor. So where do I think this is all going to end up? Well, to be honest with you, I think processing cards are going to get faster and faster, but pixels are going to become more prevalent, and I think in the long run we're always going to be struggling to keep up with what is called upon. So I don't think this is necessarily going to completely go away, but there will be more graphic speed, there will be more graphic ports, and those will solve some of the problems and probably eliminate the need. But I think the biggest killer for these multi-screen simulators is probably going to be virtual reality. Right now, for real pilots who want to train, you need to put your hands on the knobs. You need to be able to see the cockpit. When better ways for that to happen occur, and there's wider field of view and higher resolution VR, like I said, an effective way to interact with the sim that's realistic, whether it's a dummy cockpit that's mapped to the virtual reality so that you can reach out and touch a switch, or really good gloves with tactile feedback where you get the sense of handling switches and so on. Until those days come, I think we're still going to be using multi-monitor sims for realism and training. And I think virtual reality, though, is definitely the future of flight simulation. Now, for those who have stuck around to the end, I wanted to give you one more bonus. I wanted to talk about picking out a monitor to use in a multi-sim, flight sim, a TV. And you know, TVs and monitors are a lot different. So I want to quickly give you a hint. There's a website called ratings.com that really goes into this in detail. And they have a section for gaming. I wish I had found this. You know, I went out to the local Walmart about 4 years ago and bought the first one I saw that was under $500, 4K, which of course you never need. You're going to have to buy 4K now. But anyway, go to this website and you'll see they have test results on a number of TVs, and they talk about important things. Curved, and you probably don't want a curved TV. Borders is important. The smaller the borders, the better. Weight and thickness is a factor. You can go through all of these things and you can read and really educate yourself about them. But things that I've noticed is the viewing angle. You know, they show you a demo here of the viewing angle for each monitor. You can pop that out and see how as the angle changes and get an idea there. You can think about, you know, the angle you're going to be observing the TV at and get an idea. Probably at about 30 degrees would be about where for a 60-degree rake back, you're going to be about centered up on that. So about 30 degrees from the center. Anyway, lots of other things. Reflections is a big deal. I have a lot of reflection on mine. I wish I didn't. The input lag is really important because that's how the delay between the signal coming in from the computer from X-Plane to when it's displayed. And if it's great, it's a problem. Response times can cause motion issues, and And he talks about motion interpolation and so on. There's lots of factors. Judder is my problem. I have judder, and that's the jumping, as I mentioned before, jumping sideways, and that obviously combined with my iPhone is makes filming it almost impossible. It actually looks better. But anyway, you can take a look at this website. It'll give you lots of information. Many of these things you can tell by just looking at it. The other thing I suggest is if you can, go someplace and buy one. Like Costco's good, where you can take them back and buy even buy three and then take them, try one and take them back if it doesn't work before you even unbox the other two. I highly recommend you get a set of matched TVs, though. You'll never match the color and all that sort of thing. So anyway, that's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. It's probably some value, and I really do think that that a 3-monitor sim is the way to go. Although I have VR also, and I enjoy immensely flying in VR, even though it has its limitations, and I know that is the future. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Please share. Please hit that notification bell if you'd like to be included. I do this for fun only, but it does give me some sense of satisfaction when people watch the videos and comment. So let me know. I'm sure there's some things I got wrong, so please let me know. And if you have any ideas how I can do things better, I'd love to hear that. And I love to hear words of encouragement too. Wash your hands, stay healthy, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks.